Hey everybody, welcome back to the Plays and Fades YouTube channel. I'm your host, Gordo Gambles, and welcome back to another full card breakdown. This time for UFCTampa, we have ourselves 13 bouts, headlined by Covington and Buckley. And the special part about this one, the last card of 2024. You know, it has been a decent year, one where I've had some fun doing it, but the last one for a couple of weeks, you do not have a card until, I believe, January 11th. So a couple of weeks off, a couple of weeks without some UFC violence, so let's enjoy this one while we can. As always, we're going to break down these fights from a DraftKings and a betting perspective. If you want more DraftKings content, check out Establish the Run, where I do a podcast over with Brett Appley, and more betting stuff, check out CoolBet on Twitter at CoolBetCanada, and use code Gordo to sign up there as well. I appreciate you all for tuning in. Hit the like button down below, subscribe to the channel, and without wasting any more time, let's dive in. Get the fight night started with the 8-0 Josephine Knutsson versus the 9-2 Piera Rodriguez. A very interesting women's MMA bout here because I do think it's between two prospects who have some promise. You look at Josephine Knutsson and she is someone who has impressed. Very, very well-rounded. She has that kickboxing background. Trains at a great camp at MMA All-Stars there, and she is someone who has looked very good in her undefeated record so far. Piera Rodriguez has had some losses, albeit to some decent level of competition, but she was at one point a very highly touted prospect as well. She has solid judo throws in her own right. She can kickbox from range. She does have decent power, but she lacks the same moment-winning ability. I don't think she has the same hand speed or volume that Knutsson does. And all I say is I think that Knutsson is still the more hyped-up prospect, the A side of this matchup, if you will, with more tools to get it done. Now, considering the volatility of WMMA, do I want to lay a big price tag? Probably not, but I do think Knutsson is the A side. I think she's got way better hand speed on the feet. I think she's training with great partners to want to take it to the ground as well. And I do think she can put Piera Rodriguez in precarious situations, which you've seen her put before. I like Josephine Knutsson, and I think she remains undefeated this weekend to get the fight night started. DraftKings-wise, it doesn't look like the best one on paper. You know, a WMMA fight expected to go the distance, but Knutsson has scored well. 110 in her debut, one where she landed 3 takedowns at 147 strikes. Then her last one, 90 points, not the best, but 145 strikes. She has volume. I think she has potential wrestling upside here. I think she's someone who could be a sneaky mid-range target, but more of a pivot play, more of a contrarian option, because I do think there are more obvious plays that I want to target later in the slate as well. But I think she's solid in the mid-range. I think she's a great cash play in a fight that is expected to go the distance, and I don't mind her. Piera Rodriguez is not an underdog I'm going to do too often. Yes, she landed 3 against Kay Hansen and 5 takedowns against Sam Hughes, but this is a different opponent here, and I do think Knutsson having success. Give me Knutsson, solid mid-range play on DraftKings as well. Then we have the 13-7 Davy Grant versus the 10-2 Ramon Tavares, and I am very interested to see Davy Grant as the underdog here, at least at time of fill. Money is coming in on him for that's for sure, but we have a guy who is battle-tested, yes, getting up there in age, but someone who has rattled off some good wins here inside the UFC. 12 UFC bouts, wins by every method, including a cool inverted triangle, and I do think he won his last bout against Daniel Marcos, but he did drop that. He is now 2-3 in his last 5, so that could maybe be why he is coming in as a bit of an underdog, but losses to Daniel Marcos, which is controversial, Adrian Yanez, to which he put up a great fight, and Chito Vera are 3 losses that I think you can really forgive him for. Ramon Tavares is a new fighter off the Contender Series. He did go out there and beat Surrey City in a close fight last time after being knocked out in their first matchup. It was a rematch there, and the guy does have promise. I think the guy does have a ton of power in his hands. I do think he has solid hand speed and is a pretty physical fighter, but I think he lacks the technicality that someone like Davy Grant does, which is a weird thing to say because Davy Grant is more unorthodox than he is technical, but I think he has questions on his ground game as well. I think his cardio and durability are also there to be tested, considering he was dropped and considering how I have seen him get tired before. But I do think as a whole, he's a solid boxer with good hand speed and the ability to knock someone's lights out. And when you are Davy Grant, you're almost 39 years old, I can understand how that could be a path to victory for Tavares to get that knockout, but I'm going to pick Davy Grant here. I think he has the more unorthodox style, the better level of competition, taking a step down against Tavares, in my opinion. And I do think Davy Grant can stay safe on the outside, land more volume, maybe even mix in takedowns, but look to win the optics and judge scorecards. And I am going to pick him to win this one here. Surprised to see him open up as the dog. I am picking Davy Grant to win. DraftKings-wise, though, not the best historical scorer. Does have some knockout wins in his record, but still only clips 100 points once. That was 101. If anything, I may prefer the knockout upside of Tavares at 8.2K, but not my favorite fight to target. I might go elsewhere in this slate, but give me Davy Grant to get it done. Then we have the 7-1 Jamie Lynn Horth versus the 14-5 Miranda Maverick. A large favorite here, Miranda Maverick, and partially due to that last bout for Horth, it was a very questionable decision given there, but she did get a close one given to her. This just seems like two fighters who are maybe on different levels, or at least this will show us where Horth really is. I like Jamie Lynn Horth. She's a Canadian fighter. You got to cheer for your Canadians if you're me, but someone who maybe lacks that it factor, right? She has physicality and she's got durability, but not the best hand speed, not the most volume, not the best wrestling. Like, she does not excel in one area that can make her a top 15 fighter, in my opinion, or at least go out there and win at a high clip. She will have her match if she can win, but in here against Miranda Maverick has shown that not only can she strike at a high level, but she can wrestle. She's very physically imposing. She has the ability to go out there and beat top level competition. 5-1 in her last 6. Plenty of finishes, which you don't really see from this weight class here, but someone who is very physically imposing is someone who is a very powerful wrestler. And I think in this spot here, the biggest discrepancy here, I think, is going to be the physicality for Maverick. I do think she get it down to the ground. I also think Maverick may have better hand speed and has been fighting a better level of competition. If Jamie Horth wins this one, what does it look like? Is it her stalling against the cage? Is it a low volume affair like it was against Petrovic? I just think Miranda Maverick has proven more, and I do have to pick her to win this fight despite the large price tag. Am I betting her? Probably not, but I do think that she's someone who can win here. DraftKings wise, Horth has shown durability. She has shown the ability to slow down fights. So at 9.4K, Miranda Maverick isn't really stepping up the page. She has scored 108 points, but Shanna Young, Jamie Horth, maybe there's a little bit of a discrepancy there. I prefer an Alvarez, a Stirling, or Petrino, people we will talk about later. And I'm not really getting to Maverick at 9.4K. Flip side of things, Jamie Horth, I guess, has the opportunity to put up 35 points in a loss like she did against Hardy, but I don't see the ceiling for her there. I don't think she wins too much of the time there. So give me Miranda Maverick, and let's move on to the next. Then we have the 15-2 Miles Johns versus the 13-1 Felipe Lima. Felipe Lima came onto the scene. Great upset win in that debut. On short notice, really showed his name to the UFC crowd here. Really made a good account for himself. And now he's a larger favorite here against Miles Johns, who is that UFC vet, who is more battle-tested, but man, Felipe Lima looked good. He is someone who came from Octagon, pretty good organization over there, and a guy who has rattled off 13 straight wins. He has a very good, well-rounded skill set. I think he can compete in the ground very well. We saw that with submission last time, but also solid striking, very good in-and-out movement, solid power in his hands is right as well. And at 26 years old, he seems like a prospect who is still evolving, who still is very well-rounded and very apt in all areas of MMA, and someone who I do think could be a problem here in the UFC. And against Miles Johns, who, yes, has all the tools, started in the UFC, landing a ton of takedowns, has power in his hands as well, but a guy who hasn't always put it together. He's had some close bouts where he probably should have taken advantage of. He has slowed down. He has been melted in fights before, and I just think that the pace, the potential ground game of Felipe Lima, the threats that he may offer may be too much for Miles Johns, and I'm going to go with Felipe Lima here. I think he's still making improvements. I'm going to jump on the hype train and say he's got the hand speed to compete and the jiu-jitsu to really throw off the wrestling of Johns. I do think he should win this fight here. DraftKings wise though, 8.9K, I guess it finishes on the table maybe later. He scored 71 last time. And a card like this where I mentioned a lot of fighters who I really want to target, Felipe Lima isn't always my favorite option at 8.9K. He is similar to Knutsson, a mid-range pivot play, but I do think he has some later finish upside. Miles Johns, a guy I'm not really getting too often. I prefer other dogs in his range. Give me Felipe Lima. Like I said, hopping aboard the hype train. I do think this guy is making waves in here for a reason, and a guy who does a really good all-around skill set. Give me Felipe Lima. Then you have the 12-1 Sean Woodson versus the 16-5 Fernando Padilla. And Sean Woodson is someone who I do like. So I won't be watching this Sean Woodson fight, but I might as well because I saw him fight Caceres, saw him fight Jourdain, saw him fight Bazooka, saw him fight Saldana. I have seen him fight his last 4 fights live in person, and I've only been to like 6 events or 5 events in my life. So I've been following Sean Woodson around. Creepily. Not creepily, sorry. Also met him at Costco. Sean Woodson is a guy I'm around a lot. St. Louis guy. I love the guy. Unintentionally go watch him fight, but a fun fighter to watch. He's got that really lanky frame. He is called the sniper for a reason. He is a very, very good striker, very good distance management, and very solid. And he's taken on Fernando Padilla, a guy who came onto the scene, phenomenal knockout, kind of dropped the ball to Canadian Cal Nelson after that, but has shown a ton of power, very good durability in his own right, ability to mix it up on the ground, shall he have to last time, and a guy who will go forward and land with fighting intention. And it's kind of going to be a battle of the brute force and power of Padilla versus the technicality, the range control, and the sniperness of Sean Woodson here. I think making Sean Woodson the favorite could make sense here. I think he is way more proven. I think he's got the way better metrics at range. But I'm really tempted into picking Padilla this week. I mean, Sean Woodson has shown that he can be rocked. The biggest issue with him is probably his durability. And I mean, Saldana fight was a draw. Because he was dropped, he could have lost that fight if the ref stopped it. And Padilla does have power. And we saw against Caceres, Sean Woodson was backed up against the cage. He was able to be landed on, and he was there to be hit. And I think that's what Padilla does best, is really force those chaotic exchanges, land with power. So I'm really torn on this one. I think that the better minute winner here is Sean Woodson. I agree with him being the favorite, maybe not to this extent. But I do think the guy with more finish intention, the guy who I see getting his hand raised or a finish more times than not, is Fernando Padilla. And he just showed a wrestle last time. So I might take the shot here in Padilla as my pick to win, because on DraftKings, I think he's the way better option. I mean, Sean Woodson is a guy who has put up big scores before, but more times than not, when you go into decision, 70 against Caceres, 72 against Jourdain, 60 against Alal, not the best score on DraftKings, whereas Padilla, he has more finish upside. I think he has more KO opportunities here, maybe more wrestling. So him at an underdog here at 7.6K stands out to me a bit more. 2 wins in the UFC, 108, 115. I think that when it comes to DraftKings, I prefer the Padilla side. I think he does have more finish equity. I'm not completely sold on it because I do think Woodson can win this if it stays at range. But let's pick the dog here for Padilla in what should be a very, very fun fight. Then we have the 15-2-1 Klose versus the 21-3 Joel Alvarez, and another large favorite. And you kind of got to see why, right? I mean, Joel Alvarez has been on a very good run recently. 2 losses so far in the UFC to Arman Tsarukyan and Damir Ismagulov, 2 phenomenal fighters. And aside from that, he is winning every single one of his fights dominantly, inside the distance. Knocking out Elvis Burn in the 3rd round was wild. That quick sub against Casey. Joel Alvarez is a phenomenal fight finisher. He can be controlling his back, he can be outlanded from distance, but he has a phenomenal guillotine, phenomenal ground game, and a ton of power and forward pressure on the feet that could stop fights. I mean, the guy's got a great frame for the division. Hopefully he makes weight here, but a very, very dangerous fighter. Face a guy here in Klose who's put on a really good run here. Won his last 4 fights, 7 of his last 8, with his only loss coming to Beneil Dariush. I mean, Klose is a very solid fighter, and I do think when it comes to minute winning opportunities, he is probably the better minute winner. And if I get a solid line on some close by decision, maybe I'll take it because that line could be out of whack. But the more dynamic moment winner, the guy with more power on the feet, I think is Alvarez. The guy with the better submission at the game, I think, is Alvarez. And a guy who has just looked career best is a guy here in Alvarez who is extremely dangerous, a huge size and reach discrepancy at this time. It just seems like all these signs, including the youth, points to a guy here in Joel Alvarez who I do think you have to make the favorite. Now, am I counting out Klose? Definitely not. I think there's possibilities for him to win this fight here, but Alvarez is not a guy I want to stop in front of. I think he's a guy who is very dynamic and probably adds to his finish tally, a very, very dangerous fighter. And because of that dangerous finishing fighter mentality, DraftKings 9.3K solid target has scored 98, 93, 107. Maybe not the best scores, but I do think he's got an opponent who will create action for scrambles, and I do think he's a solid GPP option at 9.3K this week. Flip side of things, one of my favorite punt plays in the entire slate is Klose, because in a win at 6.9K, I think he makes optimal. 134 against Jenkins, 98 against Selecki. I think if he wins, it scores very well because it's probably grappling related. I don't think it happens too often, that's why it's a punt, but a guy who I will be sprinkling into some lineups. Then we have the prelim headliner, the 13-2 Azaitar versus the 22-19 Michael Johnson. And this is a very interesting matchup to me because it's a pretty simple dynamic. I think it's what we talk about pretty simply. It's the UFC vet, proven minute winner, a guy who's fought a great level of competition, Michael Johnson, versus the all power, knockout or bust here, Azaitar. I think when it comes to minute winning ability, I think when it comes to potential wrestling, Michael Johnson has all these tools. And I do think the more this fight gets extended, the longer it goes, Michael Johnson should be favored because he has shown to compete with a high level of competition, can mix in the takedowns as well, and does have a very, very solid range, quick in and out movement to help him win fights. I do think Michael Johnson is the better minute winner. But Azaitar does one thing really good, and that's hit really hard. That's all he really has. He was getting a ton of knockouts in the scene, has lost his last couple, but is a very, very powerful fighter. And we have seen Michael Johnson knocked out stiff as a board. I mean, a couple times now. So I think it's a pretty simple matchup of Michael Johnson's probably winning this fight until he's not. And that could be a case for Azaitar to be a live underdog this week. But I'm on Michael Johnson. I think he has too many advantages, especially in the ground game, to beat him here. And I am picking him to win. DraftKings-wise, though, a very solid fight, I think. I do like me some Michael Johnson. Scored 89 last time, but a guy who I do think has wrestling path to victory. I do think he wins this fight more times than not. And Azaitar has been knocked out, so potentially some KO upside as well at 8.7K for Michael Johnson. Flip side, I think Azaitar, I don't think he wins without a knockout. 2 wins in the UFC, scored 111, 96. His path to victory scores very well at a 7.5K price tag, so I'm on both sides. I'm picking Michael Johnson, but we'll definitely have some dog ownership of Azaitar due to that KO upside. And then to start off the main card, we have the biggest favorite here, the 5-0 Nahavo Stirling versus the 10-4 Tokkos in a very interesting 205 matchup here. Stirling, the largest favorite on the card, a guy who looked phenomenal on Dana White Contender Series, fighting out of City Kickboxing, great gym. The guy looks to have all the goods, right? Phenomenal striking, great power in his hands, great size for this division as well, and we know he can scramble, shall he have to. Whereas Tokkos hasn't had that same, let's say, aura around him, right? But knocked out in Bellator, knocked out as a minus 700 favorite to Ming Yang Zhang, and then choked out by Umar Sy. Solid level of competition, but he is getting disposed of pretty quickly, and this does seem like a setup matchup for the powerful striker to City Kickboxing in Nahavo Stirling versus the chinnier fighter in Tokkos who can be rocked, can be hit. 27-year-old Stirling looks to be the real deal. He looks to be a hyped up prospect, and I do think they're trying to get him a win here. One where I just think he has the way crisper striking, the physicality to keep this one on the feet, and the ability to really style on him. Shall it stay there? Am I playing him at 5K? Maybe not, but I will play him on DraftKings at 9.6K. I think he's got a ton of finish upside. I think he's got knockdown upside, quick win bonus even. Like, the guy is powerful. I think he's going to have a very clear striking advantage, and I do think he wins this fight more times than not. Is a hefty price tag to pay for, but if you can afford him, I do think the guy has all the tools to win this fight at a high clip. I do think it's a knockout here, and what is looking to be like a pretty soft matchup for him to get his first UFC win. Then we have the 16-0 Daniel Marcos versus the 17-5 Adrian Yanez. And Marcos and I have a bit of an up and down relationship, right? I bet on this guy in his first couple fights. I then bet on Davey Grant. Like, I love Marcos because he's made me a lot of money, but I think he should have made me even more money because I thought he lost that last one. Either way, he's bounced back and looked good in his last two. The guy is a phenomenal striker with good takedown defense and a good ability to mix it up from range, whereas Adrian Yanez was this once super hyped up prospect. A guy off the Contender Series getting a ton of knockouts left, right, and center. And then he ran into Rob Font and Jonathan Martinez, two guys who were able to strike with him and kind of take him to town in that striking a couple knockout losses there. But this guy has been extremely explosive so far in the UFC, including the Contender Series, 8 of his 9 fights ending by KO, win or loss. A guy who wants to go out there and stand and bang. He's got a ton of power in his hands. He makes a ton of very good reads in the boxing as it goes, and he can throw in a nasty head kick shall it go there too. A guy whose ground game we still haven't seen too often, a guy whose leg kicks weren't handled too well in his own guy, and a guy who is very hittable. And although super durable, we have seen him beaten down the stretch. I love Adrian Yanez. I understand the hype behind him. He's a guy who I once was very happy to back before too. I mean, he was a big favorite to Rob Font for a reason. But again, I'm a bit confused by the line. And I am no Daniel Marcos truther because one day his zero will be gone. But we saw Yanez lose fights to superior strikers, right? Guys in Martinez who can leg kick, guys in Font who can match his boxing and find the counters. And Marcos is arguably the same style, a very good physically imposing kickboxer who's got great leg kicks, great ability to mix up the targets, and who can compete in the feet as well. I think Daniel Marcos is just a better kickboxer than Yanez. Better pure boxer? Maybe not, but Marcos throws a ton of kicks to the body and to the legs, to things that were causing problem for Yanez. He was also angling off very well, the thing that Martinez did, throwing in those counters, and I just think Marcos may be the crisper striker of the two here with more to offer on the feet. Not just boxing, but kicks as well, especially those leg kicks that I do think that win in this fight. And I have to go with Daniel Marcos. Also, both guys are pretty durable, so if we do get a 15-minute kickboxing affair, we have seen that sometimes those more damaging shots of Marcos are able to win him on the scorecards. So I'm thinking Marcos here. Minus 225 is where the line is now. That's probably where I think it is now. I saw the minus 175 on Tapology, and I expect it to be wider than that. And now it is, rightfully so. So give me Daniel Marcos. DraftKings wise, if it is a 50-minute kickboxing affair, it's not going to be viable, but Marcos is going to need a knockout. One knockout win, scored 104. I think that scores very well. But aside from that, no knockout. If this does go at 15 minutes, not going to be a great play. So extremely boomer bust, solid mid-range target. If you do think Marcos gets a finish, solid play to get different, 8.5K. But aside from that, not a fight I'm getting to too often. I think there are better options. Then with the 1991 Dustin Jacoby, 11-1 Vitor Petrino. Big favorite here in Petrino. He doesn't have to worry about the Anthony Smith guillotine. He can hope to get back in his winning ways. And the guy looked like he was on a tear. He's got solid striking in the feet. He is juiced to the gills and a very, very solid power striker as well. But he's been implementing that wrestling more recently. Tried to take down Smith. Landed 3 takedowns against Pedro, 4 against Prakniau, 7 against Turkali. A guy who can wrestle pretty well, who's improving that submission game, but very physically imposing to have good top control as well. You add him the ability to compete in the feet, and I do think he can be a problem at 205 if he doesn't make dumb decisions on the feet and he's able to shore up his minute-winning ability. Dustin Jacoby, on the flip side of things, is a lifelong kickboxer who can throw with a lot of fighting attention, who is very dangerous, but who's not only his chin is there to be hit, but a guy who we have seen taken down and seen controlled the map before. I mean, Kutalaba did it early on in that fight. People have put him on his behind, and I think that, simply put, the biggest discrepancy in this fight is the offensive wrestling. I think Petrino can land takedowns, and Jacoby can't always get up from them. So I'm on Petrino, maybe not to this line, because as long as this fight's in the feet, I like the leg kicks of Jacoby, like the minute-winning opportunities. But Petrino can match the power on the feet, especially with the hands. I think he has better wrestling. I think he can match the volume as well. I think Justin Jacoby, if he fought perfectly, could win a kickboxing bout, striking from the outside, winning minutes that way. But he's not going to be perfect because the power of Petrino, the takedown threat, and the top control threat are really going to be an issue for a guy who is just very physically imposing. So give me Petrino to win. Not saying there's no path for Jacoby, but certainly an interesting matchup to say the least. DraftKings-wise, wrestling path is there for Petrino. He scored 103 before, 116. He's a very solid play in this top range if you can get to him. Like I said, Stirling's a solid play. We'll talk about Buckley. We've talked about Alvarez. There are many good plays in this top range. I don't mind Petrino. 9.1K, the grappling path to victory is there. We'll be sprinkling him in, but he's definitely not a must-have. Next up, we have the 19-7 Manel Kape versus the 14-5-2 Bruno Silva. Bruno Silva, who's looked really, really good recently, versus Manel Kape, who has also looked good, who may have title aspirations, but who hasn't been as entertaining, let's put it that way. That Makaya fight is leaving a bad taste in his mouth. He's called people words he probably shouldn't call them on the mic. Very interesting matchup here. I like Manel Kape. I'm going to pick him to win this one, but I'll say right off the rip, I think this line's a bit wide. Bruno Silva has shown to be a phenomenal competitor. He can mix it in with a takedown as well. He can scramble very well. He's got power. He's got volume, durability. Like, the guy has the ability to mix it up and the ability to compete, and I do think he belongs as a top 15, top 10 flyweight here, but I think Manel Kape has him covered. Manel Kape is very very diverse skill set, let's put it that way. He's able to compete in all areas. He's very well rounded. He's got the good ability to have good takedown defense, keep it on the feet, and he has the more power. He's a better technical striker, and I think he wins more moments. And I think that he has more dynamicism, he's more dynamic in his game, and I do think I'm going to pick him to win. Now, that's my gun to my head pick. At the way the odds are now, Bruno Silva, I think, can definitely put up a fight. I think he can put him on his behind. Plus 300 for Bruno Silva. That's a bit crazy, and I think for that reason, maybe I'll play some of him on DraftKings, but gun to my head, I am picking Manel Kape. Back to the DraftKings side of things, I don't think Kape is finishing him too often, and in decision wins, he scored 71, 92 in his last 2 in the UFC there. He needs a finish to be viable, and I just think Alvarez, Petrino, and Buckley can get finishes more often, let alone Navo, Stirling. So Bruno Silva for me fits in as a solid underdog, 7K. He's looked really good recently, won his last 4. He can make some takedowns. He has solid power on the feet as well. Do I think he wins this fight all too often? I think he can, but he definitely wins more than the 7K price tag entails. So give me Manel Kape to win. Bruno Silva has some viability on DraftKings, but maybe not my favorite fight to target as a whole. On to the co-main event, 18-6 Billy Quarantillo, and 29-14 Kape Swanson. And Billy Quarantillo, one of my top 3 favorite fighters. Love the guy. Bet him big last time. Let's hope he can bounce back here, because I do think he's a very fun fighter, extremely entertaining to watch. He's got an incredible volume. He's never in a boring fight, and the guy is honestly a phenomenal human being as well. But he definitely has an interesting matchup here against a guy in Kape Swanson who, yes, is 41 years old. Yes, is a vet of the game, but who is a very solid striker with a ton of power in his hands, and I think still has a lot of his game left. I like Billy Quarantillo. Am I a little biased? Maybe. But gun to my head, who am I going to pick to win this one? It is going to be Billy Q. You have the pressure-oriented style of Billy Quarantillo, who wants to take you down, grind you there, add in a ton of volume on the feet, be a grinder, wants to take the will out of you, versus the technical counter-striker in Kape Swanson, who, yes, has power, but who is getting up there in age, who I think can be taken down, who can be swarmed, who can have beatings put on him. And I think that although I maybe not am the biggest fan of a minus 170, minus 180 price tag on something like Billy Q, and he does have more tools to win, especially in the later rounds. And I do think this is a better matchup than the last. Kape Swanson is probably going to have the better hand speed early. He's definitely be quicker. I think he's going to have a solid power as well. But as the fight goes on, Billy Quarantillo is still going to be in there. I think he's got a takedown upside. I think he's got a pressure upside. And although he didn't look the best last time, has a very different stylistic matchup in front of him here. I'm going to pick Billy Quarantillo. And I don't know if I'll get there to the window on a bet, but a guy who I definitely love to cheer for, and I will be doing so here. However, I will be playing him on DraftKings, one of the best DraftKings scorers we've seen. 125 against Hernandez, 141 against Benitez, 109 against Nelson, 131 against Kilburn. The guy's style, his pressure, his takedowns, his volume scores very, very well. And against a guy who's 41 years old, you never know if the finish may materialize. He's going to be the bigger fighter here. Takedowns will be there, the pressure will be there, and he's landed over 100 strikes in plenty of matchups. The guy has just driven on volume looking to break you. So a very, very solid play at 8.4K, as long as he can survive the early rounds. Flip side of things, I think Kape Swanson can win this fight, and when he does, it'll probably be, he could have early KO upside. We have seen Billy Quarantillo rocked, or it could be matching the volume of Billy Quarantillo. Like, Kape Swanson is not going to allow him to play on the outside. If Billy Quarantillo is not going to allow him to play on the outside, it's going to be a lot of exchanges, it's going to be a lot of striking, and it could score very, very well, especially as underdog weight at 7.8K. So give me this fight as a whole. I'm picking Billy Quarantillo. The line might be a little wide, but I'm picking him to win. I love me some Billy Q, and he's a solid play on DraftKings this week. And the main event, we have the 17-4 Colby Covington versus the 20-6 Jacoby Buckley. Fun fact, me and the boys just out there ripping some dollar zombies at Applebee's on a Thursday night, watching some football, and lo and behold, this man comes in. This was a week after beating Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, but Jacoby Buckley walks in to the Applebee's for a family dinner, and I'm sitting there at a table of 8 dudes drinking blue drinks and watching football, and he walks in. He's carrying his kid in one hand, he's got a cast in the other hand, and he's limping with both legs. He just went through a war with Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, and I wasn't going to interrupt his dinner there, especially if you wanted to get some dollar zombies, But I went up to him, I said, "Hey man, huge fan, congrats on the win," and I went to fist bump him. And I didn't realize at the time that he had a kid in this arm, cast in the other arm, And he just looked at me, and I felt like an idiot. I felt like I am an idiot. But he did go, "Thanks, dude," and gave me his elbow, and I fist bumped his elbow. So, Buckley, if you're seeing this, I'm sorry. Let me buy you $1 zombie at Applebee's. But shout out to Joaquin Buckley, St. Louis guy, seen him around, a guy who's gained a lot of traction, a very, very fun fighter to watch. He's getting knockouts, he's fighting very well, and he's representing St. Louis, to say the least here too. The guy's very dynamic, he's very explosive, and he has come a long way. I mean, we all have seen that ninja kick knockout where he turned his career around pretty much with I'm not going to say it was the greatest knockout I've ever seen, because let's not forget, he lost before that, and then he was a plus 300 underdog, probably losing that fight to Impa Kasanganay before he landed that. He has changed his career around. With that win, he has also put heart into it. He has shown phenomenal ability to go out there and wrestle, put his physicality to good use, a ton of power, and he has looked very, very good. And now he gets a main event spot here against Colby Covington, a guy who was once the top of the division, a guy who was debatably still the top of the division if he's not watched, a guy who just fought for a title. And if you were to give this fight, 2 years ago and say, yeah, Covington-Buckley main event, who wins? Covington's minus 400. But instead we have a massive favorite in Joaquin Buckley, who hopefully is healed after fist bumping his elbow. That really shows how things have changed, because Colby Covington is going out there and he's looking awful. Like, he looked brutal against Leon Edwards. I bet on Covington. That's on me. Maybe I am an idiot. Definitely am an idiot. But he looked horrible. Wasn't shooting takedowns, looked very slow. His heart wasn't in it. Whereas Buckley's going out there fighting tooth and nail with Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, and when he doesn't know if he's winning that fight or not, he goes for the kill. He was shooting takedowns in there. He was landing with a ton of power. The guy's dangerous. He's extremely explosive, and it's fun to watch him have so much success. Now, this fight is a pretty simple breakdown for me. I think Colby Covington in the later rounds is able to have success. I favor the cardio Covington if it's the Covington of old, and I do think he can land takedowns if this is the Covington of old. But that's a lot of ifs. What I've seen right now from Buckley is a guy who is willing to go out there and wrestle, who is a lot more physically imposing than someone like Colby Covington, who has destroyed wrestlers who wanted to wrestle with him earlier, and who lands the much harder shots in the feet. I mean, Colby Covington was dropped by Jorge Masvidal past his prime. I think Buckley has a ton of power in his hands, and a guy who is looking to smash if he lands on top position as well. So if Darai wasn't having success getting pieced up on the feet, yeah, Colby Covington can land takedowns if it's the chaos of old, but I haven't seen that from him recently. So I'm picking Joaquin Buckley. I didn't know I was going to say it, but I am way more physicality. I think he wins the striking exchanges, and I think he has the physicality to keep it upright against a guy whose just heart's not in it anymore. DraftKings-wise, though, phenomenal fight for both sides. Buckley, a ton of more finish upside. 5 rounds of work, scored 100, 114, 95 in his last 3. Whereas if Covington wins, it's not going to come without 100 takedowns. Scored 156 against Masvidal, 138 against Woodley, 171 against Lawler, 135 against Dos Anjos. Like, this guy is DraftKings gold, a ton of takedowns. I think that's his path to victory here. It's going to be trying to wear down Buckley. I don't know how often he does it, but certainly an interesting fight. Give me Buckley. Hopefully I see him at Applebee's after, and it should be a very fun matchup. Again, I'll say it one last time. I know I'm sounding like a broken record. If Covington's heart's in it, this line looks a bit crazy, and I do think it makes it for a war. However, I do favor, at this point in time, the physicality, the striking, and the heart that Buckley has shown recently. However, that's going to do it for me here on the Plays and Fades YouTube channel. And quickly running through my quick picks, we're taking Joaquin Buckley, Billy Quarantillo, Manel Kape, Vitor Petrino, Daniel Marcos, Navajo Stirling, Michael Johnson, Joel Alvarez, Fernando Padilla, Felipe Lima, Miranda Maverick, Davey Grant, and Josephine Knutsson. DraftKings-wise, I love Navajo Stirling up top, and I do think in this top range, Alvarez, Petrino, and Buckley all have GBP upside. In the mid-range, Knutsson and Lima have some viability to be a bit different from that popular top range, but I also love me some Johnson and Billy Quarantillo, probably two of my favorite plays due to their pace and potential paths to victory. Underdog-wise, I think Swanson has a good path to scoring well. Padilla, I think, has finish upside. Azaitar doesn't win without getting a knockout, in my opinion. And then if Covington wins, it's probably going to come with a ton of takedowns. You can also throw in Silva and Klose as my punt plays, because I do think they have more viability to the line than the line may entail. But overall, really fun card. Betting-wise, we're coming off a solid betting week. I'm not sure yet. So check me out on Twitter, at gamblesgordo, to see what I do lock up. I have nothing locked in yet. It's finals week. I'm trying to grind out the tape, but also hit the books. Maybe hit an Applebee's after. Now I'm craving. But I appreciate y'all for tuning in. Make sure to check out Established Run, check out Coolbet, and as always, hit the like button down below and subscribe to the channel. I wish you all the best of luck in all your DraftKings and betting endeavors. Let's make some money, guys.